The Clemson Tigers, no stranger to the college football playoff, will travel to Austin, Texas. This game will be 4 o'clock Eastern time on TNT and on Max on Saturday. Texas is a 12-point favorite. The total is 52. It's the first meeting between these schools in football, which is kind of interesting, is it not? Clemson reached the college football playoff as the highest ranked team. This is the fifth highest ranked conference champion, which I think is wild to think about, that the 16th ranked team in the country is in the field, but that's the way the format works, and Clemson is back in business. Texas enters the CFB as the highest ranked at-large team. They, of course, lost the SEC championship game to Georgia. This is Texas's second straight CFB appearance. They lost to Washington last year in the semis, but Clemson has made the college football playoff 7 times. That's the second most by any team behind Alabama. They've won 2 national championships in 16 and in 18, so they are looking for their third this year, which would tie Alabama for the most by any school. Before we get into the questions here, there's a few pieces of familiarity here in this game that I found a little bit fascinating. Now, Dabo Swinney's obviously been patrolling the sideline as the head coach for the Clemson Tigers for a very long time. They're going to meet with Steve Sarkisian, the head coach of the Texas Longhorns, but they've gone against each other before. I don't know if you remember this, but in 2016, Alabama's offensive coordinator throughout the season was Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin, after the semifinal game, decided to go to FAU, which means Steve Sarkisian, who was actually on the staff that year, he was thrust into the offensive coordinator position in the interim, coached the 2017 national championship game. That was the game that Clemson won on the last second touchdown pass to Hunter Renfrow, but Steve Sarkisian was the one calling the plays in that game. So little interesting there. And then taking it one step further, Cade Klubnik, stop me if you heard this before, he's from Austin, Texas. Imagine that. The game's going to be played in Austin. Oh my goodness. All right, it's not that big a deal, but kind of interesting nonetheless, especially knowing that Cade Klubnik, who went to Austin Westlake High School, he's playing against Quinn Ewers, who went to South Lake Carroll, which, in my opinion, is the best high school in the world. Of course, that's where I went, but don't tell anybody. They played each other in the Texas 6A Division I state championship at the end of the 2020 season. Klubnik went a ridiculous 20 of 22 for 220 and a touchdown with 2 rushing scores. Ewers had a couple picks in the game, and Klubnik ultimately went on to win the state championship over Quinn and the South Lake Carroll Dragons. One other piece of familiarity, Andrew Makuba, who's a starting safety for the Texas Longhorns, was with Clemson for 3 years before transferring to Texas here this past season. So he was the ACC Rookie of the Year back in 2021 and was all ACC for a couple seasons there with the Tigers. So a bunch of familiarity. For teams that have never played each other, there's a lot of familiarity on both sides of the coin. Let's start with the first question. Can Texas run the football? Now, when Texas runs the football, they win. And their 2 losses this year, both to Georgia, they couldn't protect and they couldn't run the football. They had 28 rushes for 31 yards in the SEC championship game. That's only a modest improvement over the 27 rushes that they had for 29 yards the first time they played the Georgia Bulldogs. In their other 11 games, they're averaging 189 rushing yards a game, including 50 carries for 240 against Texas A&M in the final game of the regular season. In Clemson's 3 losses this year, they just so happen to be their 3 worst games as far as yards per carry is concerned. Against Georgia, they gave up 6.26. Against South Carolina, they gave up 6.36. And against Louisville, they gave up 7.78. So if Texas can run the football and Clemson can't stop the run, that will go a long way into helping the Longhorns create separation between them and the Tigers. Question 2. Can Clemson win some one-on-ones on the outside? Now, this is one area in which I think Clemson's improved by leaps and bounds from where they were last year. That's at wide receiver. They brought in 2 big-time freshmen in Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore. Those 2 are in the top 7 in receiving yards amongst freshmen. They have been outstanding all season long, and the best part is those 2 guys are number 2 and number 3 in the pecking order for the Clemson Tigers because Antonio Williams, he's number 1. He has done a great job all season long on downfield throws. He's done a great job operating in the slot. He's number 0, and he's going to create some problems for the Texas secondary. Wesco's been amazing. So has TJ Moore, but Antonio Williams is still the straw that stirs the drink. But Wesco probably going to be the deep ball guy. He led the ACC in receiving yards on downfield throws. So that will be something worth monitoring. Clemson's probably going to have to create some big plays, and they're going to have to probably win some one-on-ones on the outside with a relatively young receiving core catching passes from Cade Klubnik. Question number 3. Can Texas's passing game create some chunk yardage? Now, Quinn Ewers does not take a ridiculous amount of shots downfield. He's kind of lived by just taking short underneath throws. He averages just 6.6 air yards per attempt, so the average depth of target is just 6.6 yards. That's the 5th shortest among the 126 qualified FBS quarterbacks. So he makes his living at or around the line of scrimmage. In fact, 200 of his 352 attempts are within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. So think about that. Nearly 60% of his throws don't travel more than 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. But when they do, a lot of times they're going in the direction of Matthew Golden, who is their most effective downfield weapon. On throws that travel 20 plus yards downfield, they've thrown 13 his way. He's caught 7, and 3 of those 7 catches have gone for touchdowns. The rest of the team has just 2. So he is going to be very, very important if and when they do decide to open it up, it'll probably be going in the direction of Matthew Golden. Question number 4, can Cade Klubnik neutralize the talent advantage? Let's just acknowledge what it is here. Texas has better personnel at this point. They have more high-level, fully developed players. But I think a lot of people would probably lean in favor of Cade Klubnik when evaluating the quarterback situation, because Cade Klubnik has actually been a little more consistent this year than Quinn Ewers, who has battled some injuries and has had a few ups and downs. Now, Cade Klubnik's had an outstanding season. He's got 33 touchdown passes, 3rd most in the FBS behind Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. So he's done a really nice job. How do you create an advantage when a talent gap exists? You just have to manufacture big plays. You have to manufacture big plays. You have to manufacture chunk yardage. You got to kill Texas with a guillotine, not with 1,000 paper cuts. All right, Clemson has a 129 explosive plays this season. That's rushes of 10 plus and throws of 20 plus. That's how we qualify explosives. Everyone qualifies them differently. We do 10 plus yard rushes, 20 plus yard passes, and those 129, that's the 9th most in the FBS and the 2nd most in the ACC. Only Miami has more in the Atlantic Coast Conference. But one area in which Klubnik really has excelled this year is on the deep ball. On throws that travel 20 plus yards downfield, he's 30 of 66. That's one of 4 FBS quarterbacks this year with 30 plus completions on those throws, to go along with Syracuse's Kyle McCord, who has a ton of attempts, Ole Miss's Jackson Dart, and Charlotte's Deshaun Purdy. So I think this is a part where actually I think Clemson can create some opportunities down the field against Texas's corners and against their DBs. Question 5, can Clemson's pass rush get home? Against Louisville and Georgia, those were their worst pass rushing games they've played. They registered just 5 pressures against Georgia in week 1. That was the fewest on the season. And they got pressure on just 23% of Tyler Shuck's dropbacks when they played against Louisville. That was their 2nd worst rate of the season. Against Georgia, Texas, their pass protection, they struggled. Both times they played against Georgia, they really struggled protecting Quinn Ewers and whoever was back there at quarterback. In their 2 games against Georgia, they gave up 46 pressures. Against everyone else, they gave up 89 pressures. So to think about the fact that 11 games played, 89 pressures, about 8 a game, And against Georgia in those 2 games, they give up 46. That's 23 in those 2 games. That's a huge problem. So can Clemson's pass rush get home? And the guy that I'd be looking to create that pass rush would be TJ Parker. He wears number 3 for the Clemson Tigers. And question number 6. Will Texas's defense be forced to ramp up their aggressiveness? Like this Texas defense, they're a boa constrictor. Once they get around the victim, they slowly but surely constrict to the point that it squeezes the life out of you. They don't blitz. This is not a team that ramps up the pressure and starts bringing heat from all over the place. They're extremely sound with what they want to be defensively. We know what they're going to be as far as their coverages are concerned. They want to play mostly quarters where it's 4 deep zones that are accounted for by the 2 safeties and the outside corners. They're going to try to keep the ball in front of them. They're going to play zone coverage 2/3 of the time. That's the 3rd highest rate in the SEC. They have really leaned on their defense all season long. And while so much of the attention gets paid to Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian, it's been Pete Kwiatkowski's defense that has Texas in this position the last couple of years. They're ranked in the top 3 in the FBS in pretty much every major defensive category. The only teams that have scored 20-plus points on Texas this year was Georgia twice and Vanderbilt. Texas is the only team this season to not allow 350 or more yards in any game. And they forced 2 turnovers in 8 straight games. That's the longest streak in the SEC since LSU, 12 straight from 2012 to 2013. Pick in the game. I'm taking the Texas Longhorns. I think it's going to be one-sided. I think this thing gets out of hand. I think it's a bad matchup for Clemson. I think Texas will force Clemson to take the underneath stuff. They'll rally up. And then when the field condenses in the red zone, Clemson's going to have a really difficult time running the football. Unless Phil Maffa reverts back to who he was in the first 8 or 9 games of the year, I cannot envision Clemson having a lot of success running the football. I think they'll try to run Cade Klubnik, but I don't know how successful it will be. And I think Texas is too disciplined along the defensive front to allow quarterback draw to hurt them the way it's hurt some of Clemson's teams that they've played against this year. I think Texas wins this thing going away. I just don't know if Clemson will be able to score to keep up. I also think it has a chance to be low scoring. I'll take Texas in a one-sided affair against the Clemson Tigers.